frustration is United knew they didn't have good enough goalkeepers at the start of the season. They knew that. They persevered and they started the season with these two goalkeepers, neither good enough. And here we are.
So Ruben Amorim prepares for another meeting with Pep Guardiola as Andre Onana prepares for life in Turkey. We're dissecting the latest installation of the Manchester derby, looking into where it all went wrong for the Cameroon shotstopper, the situation with Kobbie Mainoo and much more. Club football is nearly back, baby. Ladies and gentlemen, we are but days away from the 197th Manchester derby. And the first since June of 2023 that will not feature Andre Onana between the sticks. As we know all too painfully, international football called a halt on the domestic game, with Ruben Amorim's men collecting their first Premier League win of the campaign, courtesy of a 97th minute Bruno Fernandes penalty against Burnley. With me today to discuss the finer details of a relatively quiet international break is my longtime buddy and sports writer for a range of publications, including Forbes and 442. It is, of course, Mr. Sam Pilger. It is great to have you back, sir. How's everything in your world?
Yeah, good to be back. Thanks. Yeah, as you said, the international break is the sort of the blemish of football. I suppose we have to have them, otherwise we don't get to have European Championships and World Cups. But they become increasingly tiresome. But another one in October and November. But glad this one is we're coming out of this one and the Premier League returns.
There's a lot to be said about the format, though, isn't there? I'm not going to spend too much time speaking about it. I didn't plan on spending any time speaking about it. But when you've got teams turning in 11 goals in one game.
11-1, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Apparently Haaland was apologising to the Moldovan goalkeeper after each goal, saying they had to rack up the goal difference. But, not great. Looking forward back to the Premier League return, finally.
Absolutely. What has been quite a tranquil period regarding news in and around the football club. We're not accustomed to this sort of stuff, Sam. We do have a few pointers to chat on and where else to start, but the imminent departure of Mr. Andre Onana. The 29-year-old is going to join the ranks of Turkish football with a loan move to Trabzonspor. And United will save in the region of around £4 million on salary payments. That is, of course, as Senna Lamens will compete with Altay Bayindir and Tom Heaton for the honours of being Amorim's new number one goalkeeper. I think somewhat fittingly, and it's not really fair, but it just seems to be the character trait since he moved to Manchester United. He signed off in a midweek international duty with Cameroon with yet another questionable piece of goalkeeping, which led to defeat. When you look at it as a whole, Sam, the man has made 102 appearances for Manchester United. He's managed 24 clean sheets and conceded 150 goals. And I look back on it from the very first game, that fortuitous debut against Wolves, where he somehow avoided conceding an injury time penalty thanks to VAR, if you can remember. And then you have all of those endless Champions League errors that inevitably led to Nemanja Matic declaring him amongst the very worst goalkeepers to have ever represented Manchester United. You could be forgiven for failing to comprehend how the starring show of a Champions League final defeat against Pep Guardiola has crumbled in such a manner. It is suspected that despite this now being a loan and there is no obligation to purchase, his final game for the club was that Carabao Cup defeat to Grimsby Town. For many, the resounding question is, why has it taken so long for this move to happen?
Well, I think you're right. I think for Onana, it's not been officially sanctioned yet, but it will be. For it to be into the second week of September and it happening, I think it should have been a priority. I think there is some relief that it's finally happened, but I don't understand why it's happened so late. Obviously, the focus was on the attacking players, which we spent 200 million on a trio of those. But I always thought goalkeeping. You don't get, and midfielder was important, and obviously it's almost impossible to get everything right in a window. That doesn't happen. So the midfielder hasn't happened. I still feel slightly unnerved by the goalkeeping situation because I feel like I was safety first when it was between Martinez and Lomans. I was veering towards the 33-year-old World Cup winner who's played in the Premier League rather than the Belgian in his early 20s who's played one season of professional football. I felt, I mean, this may be an unpopular opinion, but you could make the argument, even with Lomans in the building, and United still officially have 4 goalkeepers, that Onana is United's best goalkeeper. Now I can almost see your listeners cringing, shouting at the podcast for that, but it slightly unnerves me. I think it's a good thing he's gone. I think he was a dreadful goalkeeper, but I think that just shows you the state of United's goalkeepers now. I mean, Tom Heaton is 39. Bayinde is known more for his mistakes, other than the penalty shootout heroics at the Emirates. But other than that, and then a kid from Belgium who could be fantastic, and we might look back in 2-3 years and think how fantastic he's been. What an inspired signing. Almost like I say Lenny Yoro, he was 60 million. That wasn't a punt, but that seems to be like, look, we got that right. He looks an incredible player. It may be the same with Lomans, but at this point in time, I feel those 3 goalkeepers, there's no security there. There's no sure thing there. I think Martinez would have been, and I understand it, Villa would have wanted 30 million. He would have been on huge wages. It was United made talking about the goalkeepers leaving it late. United went in for him and put a loan offer to Villa earlier in the window, which was rejected. I just think he would have been a bit more of a security blanket, knew his way around the Premier League. I look now and I mean, it's obviously not Heaton, and we're left with Bayinde and Lomans, and you're thinking, a team of United stature, we should have a better goalkeeping roster than that. So I hope by Christmas Lomans looks an inspired signing, but it's asking a lot. So I am relieved to see the end of Onana, but strangely worried because and I did say I thought arguably Onana was still United's best goalkeeper of these 4. Lomans, no one knows. He's not played a game in the Premier League. You can't compare. I think I'd have gone with him over Bayinde, and obviously Heaton's so old. So, I like United's harsh approach now, with Højlund and Onana now. It's almost like, I mean, I think somebody's talked about Omar Barada, you get 2 seasons and that's it. I don't know if that's been briefed or it's true, but there seems to be a pattern there whereby I think the older regime would have, with Onana and Højlund, given them another season, hoped they'd come good. But I think 2 seasons is long enough to know. I think so. As I said, yeah, I think it's no bad thing he's finally gone, but I am slightly worried with the stocks left in his absence.
For what it's worth, and for whoever is listening that may have thrown several obscenities at the suggestion of that, I think Onana would probably agree with you, especially when you're seeing the reports about the suspected messages that are coming out of there. Also, when you're seeing he came back in after 2 disastrous seasons and requested a salary increase, which is rather bizarre and not particularly reading the room.
I think you're right. I mean, I think that may have played a role in it. I mean, the sort of no dickheads policy, but then, as somebody has said, when has anybody tried to sign dickheads? I mean, it's a bit of a silly theory, but I think I think there was a point where they thought he does not have the attitude for United to come back in, and we all have to look after ourselves. He's had a 25% wage cut and he's come back in and said, no, can we top it back up? But that wasn't the attitude. The attitude should have been, I am failing at my job. I'm under pressure. I need to come back and prove everything. It's all on the line. To come back and ask for a pay rise, I think that probably, if they were wavering about him, that probably that probably centered it and just thought you're not focused on what you need to do. So I think that's signed his exit clause, really.
Yeah, I think it's a fair assumption to say that, especially at a time when it's so important to try to maintain proper culture and to remove any form of toxicity within the football club. You mentioned Emi Martinez and how the club pursued him earlier in the window, inquired about the availability and the possibility of getting him on loan. I do find that particular part fascinating, and it's something that has made me consider the entire summer in a different perspective. I want to dive a little bit deeper into it. Contrary to some bizarre messages that I receive from these two accounts weekly on Twitter, I am the furthest thing from a mouthpiece. And I have been unable to shake off one worrying factor that's been in my mind for the past couple of months. I think it's fitting that we face City this weekend because they have supplied the perfect example of what I'm going to express here. Despite a footballing romantic holding any form of hope for a turn in fortunes and that we may see some miraculous shift in performances, Onana, you take the Champions League campaign that I alluded to. We scored 12 goals from 6 fixtures in a group campaign against Bayern Galatasaray in Copenhagen, only to concede 15 en route to a solitary win and 4 losses. That was quite some time ago, and for a club the size and stature of Manchester United, surely that should have been enough to act. To clarify, this isn't a personal attack on Onana. I always support every player, every coach, often to my detriment, but we went into this summer safe in the knowledge that we had to address multiple positions. I think anybody being pragmatic, it wasn't realistic to assume that we could do them all in a couple of months. This ties back into what Jim Ratcliffe said well over a year ago, that it's going to take several summer windows to address everything to ultimately aim towards Project 150. We did address the attack in impressive fashion, but we waited until deadline day and 4 outings in the league and the League Cup to decipher that Onana and Bayindir are not the solution to an ongoing problem. We now look ahead to a hugely important Manchester derby, which we will obviously get to shortly. And we've got Bayindir, Tom Heaton, and a young and improving goalkeeper. Now, I do love him, by the way, but in all likelihood, Heaton is the best option at this moment in time. Now, I mentioned City previously, and I did so because of their situation with James Trafford. Obviously, we know he's another hugely impressive goalkeeper. And United obviously attempted to lure him themselves. For anyone who's listening who's unsure about that, but he made it clear very early on that his priority was City, and that was some months ago. The figures, the metrics, they placed Trafford and Sen Lamens as 2 of the brightest young talents in world football. Trafford went to City. However, he was brought in, he was given 3 outings in the league. He made one horrific error, and City responded by bringing in Gianluigi Donnarumma. Donnarumma is 26. Trafford is 22, 23 years of age. And it took their ownership a little over a week to establish that they needed more options in goals. So when you consider that and you look at what we have and the plan that is there, surely regardless of what you deem important and what you prioritize to achieve Project 150, a position which is categorically costing you points and cup progression should have been addressed well before deadline day. As much as I can applaud Ineos for this mass cleansing of the dressing room with multiple outgoings, we've mentioned Onana, Højlund, and the way that they're looking to address the culture. You look at a reduced salary list and an impressive line of attacking recruits. Their lack of focus on the goalkeeping position really worried me, and the way that they went about that. So I'll ask you, am I being a little too harsh with that? Or would you go along the same lines of where I'm going?
No, I absolutely agree. I think that it should have been a priority at the start of the summer. The fact that it's dribbled out here into the second week of September makes no sense. And for all the fantastic attacking signings, and I think they are, for a team that finished 15th and has no European football, these are fantastic attacking signings. If Cunha had gone to, and I'm sorry, we're in the position we have to give these other clubs, our rivals, higher status. But if Cunha had signed for Liverpool and then Mbeumo had signed for Arsenal, no one would have batted an eyelid, because these are the players that can play at the very top. They've proven that. But they came to Manchester United, which is fantastic. So I think the attacking signings were so good, but with without a quality goalkeeper, and obviously that has been something that defined the Manchester United, the Ferguson era with Schmeichel, and then a little wobble, and then Van der Sar, and effectively the post Ferguson era as well. He left United a nice little present with David De Gea, who signed in 2011, got 2 years of, won the Premier League with, and then left. And there was a point where De Gea was the best goalkeeper in the world. And so United have always had some solidity in goal, certainly over the last 20, 30 years. You look at, Van der Sar, De Gea and Schmeichel must have played 25 of the last 30 years, and all of them could lay claim to be the best goalkeeper in the world for some point. Certainly all three of them. And yet now we're in this position. It's such an important position. Obviously football people, coaches talk about a spine, and that spine starts with the goalkeeper. And the fact that it must have been clear that Onana was not good enough. And that's what frustrated me. I tweeted about it at the start of the season, that the Arsenal game, Mainoo, the punch, the punch that never happened, those fine margins, United lose 1-0. And I have to say, I felt all the talk of, United played well. I just didn't buy, and my frustration was like, yeah, but winners win and losers lose. And Arsenal went back to North London with 3 points, and United had stories about, we played quite well. Maybe should have got more. Yeah, but United lost. And it was on the fine margin of a goalkeeping mistake. Fulham by India was solid. And then obviously Grimsby, that United have now could play a maximum of, could play only 40 games in a season. And that is going out the Carabao Cup, I think, was a disaster. And United started that. A, that was a route to the Europa League. B, that was a route to have more games. And United started with Andre Onana, and he makes 2 horrendous mistakes, and United lose that. The shot, the first goal, he should have saved. It went through him, and the awful. He's trying to make amends and be dominant, and he's absolutely fluffs it and leaves his goal guarded, and United are 2-0 down. And then in the penalty shootout as well, that was vaguely embarrassing as well. He seemed to dive out the way of them, most of them. So United have really started the season and have gone out the Carabao Cup and have dropped points because of goalkeeping errors. And the frustration is United knew they didn't have good enough goalkeepers at the start of the season. They knew that. They persevered, and they started the season with these 2 goalkeepers, neither good enough. And here we are. So in a way, I'm relieved that it's been freshened up, but slightly worried too, because I know De Gea was young and inexperienced. You've got to, it's a project. Lomans is a project. De Gea though was playing at a higher level when he arrived. He'd won the Europa League. He'd played for Atletico Madrid. He played in La Liga and had lots of, a decent amount of experience. Lomans doesn't have any of that. So, we were respectful. I know De Gea made a mistake in his first ever start in the Community Shield, but obviously there was a quality goalkeeper there. And as we saw, he went on to be, a United legend. But Lomans doesn't have any of that background, really, so, I know there was a fear when it looked like Martinez was going to come to United, and then Villa were in for Lomans, and there was, United have got this sort of cursed nature to them. The United fans were thinking, oh, hang on, we're going to get Martinez. We'll have a couple of years from him, and then Lomans is going to turn into this amazing goalkeeper. And we're going to look at that at Villa, and we're going to regret that. I think, if you look at how many decisions United have got wrong, we're thinking, oh no, here's another one. I hope this is, a decision that is going to look inspired very quickly, and it needs to, because the goalkeeping roster, without seeing Lomans and what it can do, looks slightly concerning.
It's something that I've spoken about for quite some time. I've wrote several articles about it as well. I do hold a slightly different feeling when it comes to a goalkeeper as opposed to an outfield player. And if you're taking, we'll say, a defender, midfielder, forward that's been playing in the Belgian Pro League, and that's his only basis for experience, I think you can hold that a little bit higher than a goalkeeper because, as I've said multiple times, Lamens comes to Manchester United. He's never played, obviously, in that calibre of division. But the size of his goals hasn't changed. The amount of saves, the save percentage, his command of the area, he seems to fit the criteria of what you want as a Premier League goalkeeper. And the fact that he's so confident in himself, it's that fine line between confidence and arrogance, and he seems to be more confident than arrogant about it. The biggest issue for me is that the deal wasn't done within the first couple of weeks of the transfer window. So he could have had a whole pre-season to be able to integrate into it. And that's the biggest problem that I have now. When we spoke at the beginning of last season, you were one of leading the sort of majority, per se, of the highly critical of Erik ten Hag and the decision to retain his services. Fast forward to today, there has been about as much change in the football club as we could have imagined. Ruben Amorim continues to retain his critics, and he's receiving shots for everything from his decision to continue with Bruno in midfield or a lack of regular starting time for Kobbie Mainoo, even down to a decision to prioritise Benjamin Sesko off the bench as he's trying to integrate him into his team. Disregarding that and not disregarding what you said about your interpretation of the Arsenal game, we have seen a hugely impressive performance against Arsenal. In that, I know it did end in defeat, and ultimately that's all the people will remember. But then we had that largely positive showing for about 30 to 35 minutes against Fulham, ended in a draw, another dominant game against Burnley, which inevitably required a fortuitous penalty to get us over the line. And once again, by India contributed to that with unnecessary goalkeeping that brought Burnley back into the game. And then I know we cannot forget the horror show that we witnessed at Blundell Park. I'm curious because you're never going to hold back with this. How are you feeling about this new look Manchester United and Amorim's progression with maintaining his philosophy at Old Trafford? Do you hold similar concerns as you did 2 years ago under Ten Hag?
I mean, I do hold concerns. I feel I really want him to succeed. I think, like most people, I really like Ruben Amorim. I like his charisma. I like how he communicates. I like his style. I like the way he sees football. This is a manager I want to succeed. I want every Manchester United manager to succeed. I didn't particularly want to Erik ten Hag, never did, but who cares? It's not about that. It's about results, and Ten Hag's results weren't good enough. So I've prefaced it by saying how much I like Amorim, but the results have been horrendous, and I think sometimes we don't step back enough and realize that. I think we're so desperate for Amorim to be a success because we're tired of the churn. We're tired of starting again, but and we're just hopeful that that this is it, and that patience pays off. And the Ferguson comparisons which are rolled out, and I don't think they are anymore. Of obviously his slow start between 1986 and 1990. It is a different era, and you don't get 3 years. But I mean, it shocked me how bad Amorim's results are, and I think it's 8 Premier League wins in 30 games. And I think, I honestly think if he was manager of Leicester or Southampton or Norwich, he would have been sacked. He would have been sacked because that is his win record. And if you look at those wins, I think that Colin Miller from the Athletic pulled out the stat that there was only 4 wins against teams that were in the Premier League last year. So even the Burnley win doesn't count. It's like 4 wins in 25 games against teams that were in last year's Premier League. So a lot of United beat Ipswich last year and Leicester, and now Burnley are promoted. So sort of low hanging fruit. I mean, it really. That concerns me, and although there's been a bit of a lull now because United finished with a much needed win ahead of the international break, it's still the season has still started with 1 win in 4 games, and that was courtesy of a 97th minute penalty. So I've seen there is some room for optimism. I've seen the stats of the most shots, the most touches in the opposition area. I think it's the second highest XG. So, that's all very welcome, and you hope that ushers in some goals. I think the signings have been inspired. I think already, Mbeumo scored twice. Cunha has just, I was at Fulham, and for the first 10 minutes, he could have had a hat trick and just looked an incredible player. That touch he took from Bayindir, and I was, that long ball Bayindir, that was fantastic. The touch, who am I to tell him? But he just needed to lob it. If he lobs that, but he put it, and the touch was amazing, and he lobs it. United are in front. Of course, Bruno misses a penalty as well. So I think there's a lot of reason for optimism, but I mean, it's a bit scary because Amorim's record is horrendous. And even this season, it's 1 win in 4. So and it's City away, and then Chelsea, Brentford, where, obviously we lost 4-0 a few seasons ago. And then and unfortunately there's no midweek games. We're just going to have to sit with results, and the results will mean so much more now, because previously that, you might have a bad Premier League result at the weekend, but there was a Europa League game on the Thursday, and it would, it would get forgotten. Now we're going to sit with results for longer. I want to be more optimistic. I really, really do. I want to look back and say, yeah, we were right to be patient. But judging on what we're seeing so far, since November, since he arrived, it's not been great. And has this season been a massive improvement? 1 win in 4. I'm not sure, but there are, as we, these results could have gone another way. United could have been Arsenal, should have probably beaten Fulham. So could have, should have, would have. That's boring, isn't it? It's football. You've got to take your chances, and that's it, isn't it? These stats show United are more attacking, show United are getting more shots, but you've got to put them away. And I do think it's a massive upgrade. Garnacho was sketchy in front of goal. Højlund wasn't clinical at all. Rashford wasn't the same player for 2 years. So there are new characters there now. So hopefully the goals start coming.
I would like to think we have seen enough, disregarding Grimsby, in those 3 Premier League games to say that there is maybe a growing unison in the dressing room to state that they are on board with his tactical philosophy. Albeit I did have my reservations with his post-match comments after Grimsby. I thought it was done and dusted. Before we shift the focus to football, I do want to get your opinion on one of the most discussed topics throughout the final stages of the window, though, and that is Mr. Kobbie Mainoo. Do you see this through the eyes of a 20-year-old who wants football to aid consideration towards England? Or should he prioritise getting regular game time for Manchester United before anything else, Sam?
I think I can sympathise, but it was hugely depressing that he asked to leave. I mean, I think he might have accepted a permanent move and then downgraded that to say, "Oh, just send me out on loan." But you do have to question. I mean, this is a weak Manchester United midfield. There's an aging Casemiro who will be let go in a year's time. There is Ugarte who, well, that's another subject, who just does not look like a £50 million midfielder, and everyone's hoping he can suddenly show why £50 million was spent on him. And then Bruno, who's a converted, I think he's better at number 10. So he should back himself to get into this midfield. I think he was probably perturbed and upset by Amorim's comment that it's him or Bruno, and I think that was what pushed him towards the exit. He thought, well, it's me or Bruno. He's the captain. Even when his form is dreadful, he's picked because Bruno has that moment in him, putting away a 97-minute penalty, a winner, a moment of that inspiration. Bruno is left on the pitch even when he is stinking it up, and you can understand that. So you're thinking, well, if that's what I've got to do to get past him, then I might as well look elsewhere. I think that has been shelved, hasn't it? Really, he played against Grimsby. He came on against Burnley. I think, to be fair, I think Amorim. I think we haven't seen the best of Mainoo, other than the goal against Lyon. The wonderful goal against Lyon. We haven't seen Mainoo do much for United for a whole year. I mean, his breakout season, obviously finishing the final of the European Championships for England, was incredible. I mean, just hugely exciting. But we haven't really seen much from Mainoo for a year. He was injured. United were in poor form. He needs to kick on, and rather than asking for moves, he needs to, he's a United fan, a local lad. He needs to stay and fight for his position and show that he can do it at United. So, I do worry though, like, with the midfield, there's only, 2 spots and he hasn't started a Premier League game. Of what he'll do. Look, I hope that's something that sorts itself out, because the thought of Mainoo leaving, I think we could get on board with Garnacho leaving, because the symbolism though of United's 2 scorers in the 2024 FA Cup final, both academy graduates, Mainoo and Garnacho, leaving and asking to leave a season later. Something has gone wrong there. Something has gone wrong. I think we can get on board with Garnacho because people didn't like his attitude and this and that, and which I never thought. He did have an attitude, but so did a young Cristiano Ronaldo. That happens. I felt maybe that was a failure of management to get the best out of him, to manage him. But because he was maybe Argentinian and annoyed a few people, we could, we'll understand that. But the Mainoo thing was like, no, that was like a bridge too far. That the fact that he was at risk of leaving felt desperately something had gone really wrong. So I think I'm like a lot of United fans, just really hoping that that we see the Kobbie Mainoo, who made his debut against Everton and wowed us all for 6 more months, and surged through the Wolves defence with the winner and the goal against Liverpool in the Cup and so on. That was in his first season. Not much highlights in his second season, but let's hope he comes back for his third season.
I think it all boils down to what you see about the joy of youth, just having the pure joy and not pressure. That's what we saw in the opening season. There was a little bit more hype and expectation after what he delivered in that debut campaign, particularly for England in the Euros. I'm glad you touched upon that, because we didn't see anything close to that. A couple of spurts here and there, and obviously the Lyon goal, as you said. But the way I see it, it's always been club over country when it comes to Manchester United. And yes, he wants to have aspirations to represent his country in a major tournament, but you're a Manchester United player, you're a local lad, and you're only after turning 20 years of age a few months ago. There's no God-given right for any football player to play for Manchester United. And as much as I love Kobbie Mainoo, and I love him, I want him to stay at the football club for his entire career, do a gigsy on it, and lead the midfield for years to come. Just put your head down. You've been set a task in terms of, there's the gauntlet, get through it and make this position your own. We all know he's got the ability to be able to do it, albeit some question the fact that maybe he's better in kind of closer to the goal. I personally believe he is such a technically gifted footballer. He's just an amazing tactician on the field that I think if you just put him anywhere, he can learn how to play it. He just needs to realise that he's got a manager there that really does want him to excel and succeed. If he didn't, it would have been like Toby Collier and he would have been sent out on loan somewhere, or the club would have gone towards that particular mantle of pure profit and selling him off and then gauging more funds to be able to enhance this project that they have. But I think there's going to be ample time for him between here and the end of the season to prove his worth. And I just hope that he grasps every opportunity and makes himself undroppable. I suppose at this point, we're speaking now for nearly 30 minutes. We might as well talk about football, and brings us to the weekend fixture with the latest installment of the Manchester Derby. I just want to clarify, I would never dream of getting ahead of myself against any Premier League side of late, particularly a Pep Guardiola team. But given their well-documented issues of late and the many vulnerabilities that they've had on show themselves, I believe this is perhaps one of the more favourable City sides that we will face in recent years. Yes, they have won 5 of the previous 8 Premier League meetings, but United collected 3 points in this fixture last year, and that was adding to the draw at Old Trafford in the reverse game. United have inflicted 25% of all of Pep's home defeats in the league and are aiming for consecutive wins at the Etihad for the first time since March 2021. Given all that we know and have discussed, Sam, how are you feeling heading into the weekend?
I think there is a United are higher than City in the league, and I think a win could possibly even take United in the top 4, which is incredible. I mean, obviously it's early season, so these things can happen. But yeah, United have started better than City. City have lost twice to Tottenham and Brighton. United won their last game. We're not sure about Cunha's injury yet, or Mount, so we're not sure there. I feel pretty positive, really. Obviously, United won at the Etihad last season. It's early in the season. It's possibly a good time to go there. I really think United need to win one of City or Chelsea the next 2 games. I think the pressure will be huge if United lose and draw. They have to beat at least one of these games and take a scalp of City or Chelsea, because when the fixtures came out, it was that's a tough start with Arsenal and then these 2 games, and to not win any of them. So I think City is a winnable game. United, obviously the players have been on international duty, but Amorim and his staff would have had time to think about it and, show no fear. Went there and won last year, and hopefully do so again.
To me, this is a game that offers so many variables for Amorim, for the squad as a collective, and the fan base. When you consider the magnitude of this opening schedule that you have alluded to, it was always going to be a daunting task for a 15th place finish. But as odd as it is in recent years, I prefer playing the bigger teams, not only as a football fan, but from a competitive perspective, because I feel that even as poor as things have gone, it's always seemed to bring out the best. As you said, with Chelsea to follow, before Brentford, Sunderland, and then Liverpool. Momentum, for me, will be the biggest factor for this side. And when you're speaking about the necessity to win either against City or Chelsea, I believe a win against City can generate an invaluable pull, and it will be required. Because fundamentally, we need to see a continuation of the type of performances that we saw against Arsenal and Burnley, because it allows supporters to see an identity forming. You've touched upon it several times, and there's 4 games with 1 victory. You have 3 Premier League outings, you've got 4 points. It's very little for supporters to grasp onto, particularly when you're coming off of the coattails of last season. But if you can see an identity, and if you can see a style of play that continues from game to game, then that sets an entirely different dynamic. You can factor in so many possibilities, and the confidence that somebody like Benjamin Sesko could even gather from starting or coming off the bench and hitting the back of the net in a derby. A result over the weekend sends you into a tie as well with a Chelsea side that will have travelled to Germany 3 days before to face Bayern. Now, that ties into the whole dynamic that there's never a good time for United to be excluded from European competition. But this is the literal definition of the moment where we see the advantages rear their heads. And I don't think there's any excuses. This side must deliver a fitting response against, not necessarily one of them, against both of City and Chelsea, just to show that there is serious growth within this dressing room. And with that, and for the benefit of all those listening who require our expert views, sir, what way do you see the game playing out? And now, no pressure.
Yeah, I mean, no pressure. I mean, this is City that has obviously handed United some severe beatings over the years. But I mean, I couldn't. Would it be a surprise if Haaland gets a hat trick and United lose 4-1 or something? I hate to say it, but no. But I think, as we talked about, United have had the most shots, most touches in the opposition area, second highest XG, all these sort of things I'm hoping come to fruition, and United win and put together a performance and a result, which hasn't happened yet. They're threatened to happen. So I'm going for United win.
I know it's this all jumpy thing that we get before every fixture. We seem to disregard everything that's happened and just focus on what's going to happen or what we manifest is going to happen. But I do believe that there is so much credence in what you're saying, because if you continue to create opportunities game after game after game, eventually they're going to start hitting the back of the net. And if those opportunities turn into goals, that will turn into momentum, and then anything is possible. So I too believe City are there for the taking. I think of all the teams that we have seen from City in recent years, I think this one offers the most opportunities to be beaten. As you said, I don't even want to talk about it, but it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world if Haaland came out and continued his international exploits that he had for Norway. But I am going along the same lines as you, and I think United are going to get the job done. And as always, it is a pleasure to chat with you, my friend. Do you have anything interesting coming up on your side over the coming weeks or months?
No, I'm nothing to promote. No,
nothing to promote.
Nothing to promote. No.
Okay.
But no, as you say, pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully next time we're all these seeds would have grown into something more beautiful and admirable. So let's see.
God, I hope so, because every single conversation we've had in this podcast has been so bloody dreary. And
it has, yeah.
And to you, loyal listener, thank you once more for lending me your ear today. It is always appreciated. If you haven't already done so, kindly like and subscribe wherever you are listening. And if you can leave a little review, it only takes seconds and it would mean a great deal. Get in touch over any of our socials and continue to send your emails through at editor@theatre-of-red.com. I do promise you, I will get back to each and every one of them. So until next week, enjoy your weekend and the return of club football for the Manchester Derby. And let's hope we're celebrating 3 points next week when we catch up.